Saturday 11th. Fresh breezes at south-south-east and south-east by south, with which we steered along shore north-west by west until 1 o'clock, when the petty officer at the masthead called out that he saw land ahead, extending quite round to the islands without, and a large reef between us and them. Upon this I went to the masthead myself. The reef I saw very plain, which was now so far to windward that we could not weather it. But what he took for mainland ahead were only small islands, for such they appeared to me. But before I had well got from masthead, the master and some others went up, who all asserted that it was a continuation of the mainland. And to make it still more alarming, they said they saw breakers in a manner all round us. We immediately hauled upon a wind in for the land, and made the signal for the boat, which was ahead sounding, to come on board. But as she was well to leeward, we were obliged to edge away to take her up, and soon after came to an anchor under a point of the main, in 1/4 less 5 fathoms, about a mile from the shore, Cape Flattery, bearing south-east, distant 3½ leagues. After this I landed and went upon the point, which is pretty high, from which I had a view of the sea coast, which trended away north-west by west 8 or 10 leagues, which was as far as I could see, the weather not being very clear. I likewise saw 9 or 10 small, low islands, and some shoals laying off the coast, and some large shoals between the main and the 3 high islands without, which I was now well assured were islands, and not a part of the mainland, as some had taken them to be. Excepting Cape Flattery, and the point I am now upon, which I have named Point Lookout, the mainland next the sea, to the northward of Cape Bedford, is low and checkered with white sand and green bushes, etc., for 10 or 12 miles inland, beyond which is high land. To the northward of Point Lookout, the shore appeared to be shoal and flat some distance off, which was no good sign of meeting with a channel in with the land, as we have hitherto done. We saw the footsteps of people upon the sand, and smoke and fire up in the country, and in the evening returned on board, where I came to a resolution to visit one of the high islands in the offing in my boat, as they lay at least 5 leagues out at sea, and seemed to be of such a height that from the top of one of them I hoped to see and find a passage out to sea clear of the shoals. Accordingly, in the morning, I set out in the pinnace for the northernmost and largest of the 3, accompanied by Mr. Banks. At the same time, I sent the master in the yawl to leeward, to sound between the low islands and the main. In my way to the island, I passed over a large reef of coral rocks and sand, which lies about 2 leagues from the island. I left another to leeward, which lays about 3 miles from the island. On the north part of this is a low sandy isle with trees upon it. On the reef we passed over in the boat, we saw several turtle, and chased 1 or 2, but caught none, it blowing too hard, and I had no time to spare, being otherwise employed. I did not reach the island until half an hour after 1 o'clock in the p.m. on Sunday 12th, when I immediately went upon the highest hill on the island, where, to my mortification, I discovered a reef of rocks, laying about 2 or 3 leagues without the island, extending in a line north-west and south-east, farther than I could see, on which the sea broke very high. This, however, gave one great hopes that they were the outermost shoals, as I did not doubt but what I should be able to get without them, for there appeared to be several breaks or partitions in the reef, and deep water between it and the islands. I stayed upon the hill until near sunset, but the weather continued so hazy all the time that I could not see above 4 or 5 leagues round me, so that I came down much disappointed in the prospect I expected to have had, but being in hopes the morning might prove clearer and give me a better view of the shoals. With this view I stayed all night upon the island, and at 3 in the morning sent the pinnace with one of the mates I had with me to sound between the island and the reefs, and to examine one of the breaks or channels, and in the meantime I went again upon the hill, where I arrived by sunrise, but found it much hazier than in the evening. About noon the pinnace returned, having been out as far as the reef, and found from 15 to 28 fathoms water. It blowed so hard that they durst not venture into one of the channels, which the mate said seemed to him to be very narrow. But this did not discourage me, for I thought from the place he was at, he must have seen it at disadvantage. Before I quit this island, I shall describe it. It lies, as I have before observed, about 5 leagues from the main. It is about 8 miles in circuit, and of a height sufficient to be seen 10 or 12 leagues. It is mostly high land, very rocky and barren, except on the northwest side, where there are some sandy bays and low land, which last is covered with thin long grass, trees, etc., the same as upon the main. Here is also fresh water in 2 places. The one is a running stream, the water a little brackish where I tasted it, which was close to the sea. The other is a standing pool close behind the sandy beach, of good sweet water, as I dare say the other is a little way from the sea beach. The only land animals we saw here were lizards, and these seemed to be pretty plenty, which occasioned my naming the island Lizard Island. The inhabitants of the main visit this island at some seasons of the year, for we saw the ruins of several of their huts and heaps of shells, etc. Southeast, 4 or 5 miles from this island, lay the other 2 high islands, which are very small compared to this, and near them lay 3 others yet smaller and lower islands, and several shoals or reefs, especially to the southeast. There is, however, a clear passage from Cape Flattery to those islands, and even quite out to the outer reefs, leaving the above islands to the southeast and Lizard Island to the northwest. Monday, 13th. At 2 p.m. I left Lizard Island in order to return to the ship, and in my way landed upon the low sandy isle mentioned in coming out. We found on this island a pretty number of birds, the most of them sea-fowl, except eagles. 2 of the latter we shot, and some of the others. We likewise saw some turtles, but got none, for the reasons before mentioned. After leaving Eagle Isle, I stood southwest, direct for the ship, sounding all the way, and had not less than 8 fathoms, nor more than 14. I had the same depth of water between Lizard and Eagle Isle. After I got on board, the master informed me he had been down to the islands I had directed him to go to, which he judged to lay about 3 leagues from the main, and had sounded the channel between the 2, found 7 fathoms. This was near the islands, for in with the main he had only 9 feet 3 miles off, but without the islands he found 10, 12, and 14 fathoms. He found upon the islands piles of turtle shells, and some fins that were so fresh that both he and the boat's crew ate of them. This showed that the natives must have been there lately. After well considering both what I had seen myself and the report of the masters, I found by experience that by keeping in with the mainland we should be in continued danger, besides the risk we should run in being locked in with shoals and reefs by not finding a passage out to leeward. In case we persevered in keeping the shore on board, an accident of this kind, or any other that might happen to the ship, would infallibly lose our passage to the East Indies this season, and might prove the ruin of both ourselves and the voyage, as we have now little more than 3 months' provisions on board, and that at short allowance. Wherefore, after consulting with the officers, I resolved to weigh in the morning, and endeavour to quit the coast altogether until such time as I found I could approach it with less danger. With this view, we got under sail at daylight in the morning, and stood out north-east for the north-west end of Lizard Island, having Eagle Island to windward of us, having the pinnace ahead sounding. And here we found a good channel, wherein we had from 9 to 14 fathoms. At noon, the north end of Lizard Island bore east-south-east, distant 1 mile. Latitude observed 14 degrees 38 minutes south, depth of water 14 fathoms. We now took the pinnace in tow, knowing that there were no dangers until we got out to the reefs.